Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to talk about how to take your 2D explorations that you kind of drew out on the pages before, like this, and we are going to sort of dwindle them down a little bit further into more apparel-like products. So let's go ahead and get started. So just to recap, last time we took these images that we created by collaging the research pictures that we gathered, and we started to draw them out and give them purpose. And so just as an example, if you remember, these were the first few that I did, and now that we've got those done, we are going to continue with that process. So before we begin, I want to just kind of touch on the fact that I took mine and pasted them into the book. I know I mentioned that this is not the best idea if you're going to kind of need them. So what I did is I actually took scans of everything so I could use them later. I just like to work physically in the book, so I put them down by gluing them. And so you can see how I have each mood board's 2D explorations here. And what we're going to do from this point is create a sort of line of products where we've noted the things that we do and don't like about them. So sometimes when I'm doing this, I will sometimes make the notes digitally, like I'm working in a tech pack or flat kind of call outs. But a lot of times I just put them in the sketchbook directly so that you can see the process and how one thing goes to the next. So what I did with these specific items, as you can see, they've been cut out and pasted into the sketchbook. Prior to this, they were on pages that you saw me drawing on, and it's okay to put them directly on here. I just cut them out so I could, use them more effectively and make sure that they fit on the pages I wanted them to, and that way I could write and it'd be defined. So this is just my preference. You always could just directly paste them, but just remember to make copies if you're going to do that. So the very first thing that you should know about making notations about the products that you're designing is you need to understand that function is first. And so if you're creating a collection for fall winter like this one, you want to make sure that you're making notations about whether or not the product is serving the purpose that it's supposed to serve. And so, for example, in this first jacket that I drew out, it's a little busy, so I definitely made a note saying that there were too many seams, and I identified that this was going to close by zipper in the front, and I made sure that I noted that either the sleeve zigzag detail or the side seam zigzag detail of the coat could be used, but not necessarily both, because it was just a little too much. I didn't like the angle, and I just thought that this was a very small hemline in terms of length. And so as you can see, I'm starting to think about, does this work? Is this fitting with the product guidelines that I want it to have? Does it fit the season, and will it be effective when merchandising in the future? Another thing that you have to do when you're making notes is you have to consider your fabrications. And so when you are playing around with this, it's really good to reference the fabrics that you've already selected, which is why I talked about selecting fabrics before I talked about designing silhouettes. Because in order to understand what you're going to create, you have to understand what fabrics you have available. So what I recommend doing is taking the fabric swatches that you have and just laying them out next to, as you're making your notes on them, however you do it, and just kind of figuring out, okay, like, do I have a fabric that will stand out far enough? Does it have enough structure? And I have one that's pretty structural in nature, so yes, I can create that sleeve if I wanted that drama. And do I have something that's going to sort of double up, for instance, like here in this pocket that I've drawn, this idea of a pocket. And if you were to take the structural component of this and double it up like you would if you were doing a pocket, it might become a little too thick. And you have to think about linings. And so if I made a jacket, like, could I line it from this? I don't know, it seems a little light for this. And what about this sort of lighter green? Like, this would work just fine. So as you can see, you have to think about what you have on hand as you're making the notes. You can't just make the notes because you don't like something. Obviously I did here where I said either one or the other, because that's more of a design characteristic, not a functional characteristic. So if we're thinking about the function of it, then we have to consider the fabrics. So in a future video, I will actually talk about how we can take something like this and make it more ready to wear. I'm not going to go into that in this video because I really just want this to be about how to think about the product in terms of function and fabrication and making notations about them based on your research, not necessarily basing everything that you're drawing and noting on something like ready-to-wear characteristics that are common in the market. And so we'll do that in a different video. So just to kind of go over what I've done, I have taken pretty much all of these, every single one of them I drew out that I showed you prior, and I pasted them in order that I drew them, and I'm not even going to bother going through all these notes because, you know, you need to be thinking about your product. I could show you that I changed the neckline of something or decreased the seams or the style lines or the sleeves, making them the same. That's not really important. What's important is that you understand why you're doing it, and so it's up to you. I mean, if the functionality of a sleeve being asymmetrical, for instance, here is that you get some sort of pocketing, you know, maybe this is a pocket or something, that's up to you to decide. It's not something that I can teach you necessarily. But in terms of like here where I just say like, I want symmetry, okay, so we have symmetry and that's what I'm gonna go for. So as far as, you know, telling you what to do, that's not going to be something that I can do. But as you can see, this is something along the lines of what you'll want to have at the end of the process. You'll want to have pages exploring the things that you like, the things you don't like that derived from those 2D exploration pages. And so I've gotten all the way to here where I've drawn out exactly what I perceived. And now I'm going to move forward into actually making them garments. So just to take you back and kind of make this all make sense to you, this was the first page that I created with the 2D experimentation using my research images. From this page, I created the garments that were represented on this page. And I made the notes about the garments that I thought worked and things that didn't work. And then I created these. And these are the next stage. These are what you are going to use in the next process of narrowing down your design choices. And you can see I didn't use the colors from my collection. I didn't use anything of that nature. I simply just used a grayscale. And the reason I did that is because I'm just showing the different fabrication. So right now is a perfect opportunity to kind of come in and explain another little thing that I do here as I'm working, you know, from one thing to another, and that is I will use either like Pinterest pages or WGSN, like trend forecasting pages, whatever it is. My university actually has one, and I use it because I have access since I pay tuition there, and I'm able to access the trends that are going to be available in terms of products in the future. So in this page here, I've identified the must-haves of fall 2021 based on that. So I'm kind of mixing the more like trend forecasting side of making clothes with the more creative process. And this is the only time I do that, so I can try to keep an idea of, okay, well, at the end of the day, this needs to be a product. How do I make it a product? And this is how I can do it. So just to kind of give you a rundown of this, I don't know how well the camera's picking this up, but there are things like capes and ponchos, sweater dresses, puff sleeves, slouchy jeans, overcoats, parkas, puffers, blazers, turtlenecks, midi skirts, and leather separates. So obviously we're not going to necessarily touch on everything in our collection, but it does give a good starting guideline to the types of apparel items you'd want to keep your eye on as you're making these. So let's go ahead and go over what I've created just on the first page so you can get an idea of how that edit created this new item. From this, I mentioned that there were way too many seams. There was a zip up front that I liked, that it worked well, but I thought the neckline was a little too long up the neck. There was also way too many zigzags, and the length was a little too short in terms of hemline, and the style lines that was created at this diagonal just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So how I interpreted that was I took the neckline down, I kept my zipper, but I added a placket rather than having these two. I expanded my pockets here, and now they're here. And I've kept the zigzags on the sleeve, but I got rid of them on the side seam so they didn't interact with that piece here for the pocket. I extended the hemline, and I kept this sort of, cutout type detail at the waist. In terms of this top here, it was sleeveless, which did not make sense for fall, so I immediately realized that needed to be changed. And there was a sense of transparency here, which I didn't necessarily like, because even though I had it in my 2D exploration, it didn't really make sense as a whole. I didn't have anything else that was necessarily transparent rather than opaque, so I had to work with that as well. I did love the ideas of the layers, and so I did keep that, just adding a general sleeve, and played with the idea of the panels that were underneath. And so you can see I kept the paneling here, and I continued this layered zigzag, and I kept the same shape at the top, but I got rid of the transparency and made the garment completely opaque. When working with this top, if you were creating something that was super avant-garde or maybe a little weird, that's okay, you can do that, but I really wanted this collection to be something that could be worn, so I had to think about that function aspect like I was talking about earlier. So in this particular top, there were way too many style lines going on in this section, and way too many going on in this section, and the shape was just bizarre, and it almost felt like, I don't know that they'd be the move, so the mobility was limited, and this funnel neck was just not kind of what I wanted, and it just happened because that's the shape I got from the key that I used, but I did like the cutout. So in order to interpret that, I changed the entire thing to have this knit neck. I kept the sort of opening. I got rid of all of this. Instead of making it like a bustier style, I just dropped it into a basic, square top, and this sort of cap sleeve that is detached from the shoulder. That was the concept here, and what I'll do with that, I don't know, but that just gives you an idea of how that was interpreted. And with this skirt in particular, there was a lot going on. So again, I'm reducing things. I'm taking some of the zigzags away. I'm thinking about how the asymmetry is a little weird. I don't like that. It didn't really make sense with anything else on the page. It was just this random asymmetrical component that didn't make any sense. So getting rid of that, helped my brain process the skirt. And then I also was thinking about these zigzags in particular, here and here, as being folds rather than being seams. And so what would that look like? And so that's what I interpret that one to look like. And here is what I've drawn. So you can see I've got an underskirt, I've got a seamed panel here, and then it's flipped out and sewn. So it's more basic in structure, but it has a similar quality to the original. So for the skirt portion here, I really liked what I had going on, but I definitely did not like the sharpness of this, even though it was very dramatic. I thought maybe we could reduce that and also extend it. The length was kind of like mid-calf, which was just weird. So just kind of making it more symmetrical, reducing some lines and sharpness and taming that. And I came up with this. So as you can see, it's a skirt, and yes, it has a seam, and it kind of looks like a pair of pants, but maybe it will be pants. Maybe it can become pants, and that's something that can happen in the future. But at the same time, this is a very basic rendering, and I'm just getting a more apparel-like item on the page. The last thing I did was I focused on this dress, which again, if you're going to be wearing a dress in the winter in Chicago, you probably want sleeves. So I didn't like this whole sleeveless thing, and I just thought there were way too many style lines. But I did consider something that I didn't consider prior, which was that these really could be interpreted as a print. And so if you wanted to think about your style lines as you're working as a potential to create a print, this would be a good opportunity. Because, I mean, you could do your own thing and it could be really awesome. So obviously in this situation, I'm not designing any prints. Otherwise, I would have put it on the print page that I told you about. So we're just going to move forward as if they're style lines. So with that being said, what I did was I created this, and that is basically the same exact dress minus this center seam here. And I kept the transparency because I wanted to see what it would look like. I didn't end up liking it. I wish I wouldn't have kept the transparency now that I look at it. But I dropped the paneling because I kept it here. So there was no need to have it on the sleeve and the bodice. But I did keep that zigzag layered approach to the top here at the yoke. So what I'm going to do now, and I'm going to fast forward through this process so you can, again, see me work without me just talking about it and it getting annoying. I'm going to draw these out just like I did before, and I'm going to show you at the end how these all will get interpreted into garments that are based on the notes that I've made. And as you can see, I've got some pretty bizarre things here. Like this is a very strange neck that I didn't like, and this asymmetry was weird, and there was a lot going on in these pants, and this was, you know, there's a lot to take in. And remember, our goal is to make products that people wear, because profit is how you continue to do this, and so we want to keep in mind our customer. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. But before I do, when you see me working with the, you know, kind of idea here and the notes that we've made on the paper, you'll see me working with the tech flat that I mentioned previously. And so that's going to be this piece here, and just like before when we were drawing these, I'm just going to do it again. And so I'm not focusing on the back. I'm going to use this. I'm going to take paper, put it on top, and do it. And I'm going to use 3 different markers, so just to identify the different fabrications. I don't imagine that anything will need more than 3 fabrics right now. Some I might design with 3 and then I only use 2 or change it to 1, and that's something that we'll talk about in the future. So if you see me using gray, that's just my way of identifying the different types of fabrics that could be placed in that specific section. So for example, you know, here you have a dark gray, a medium gray, and a light gray. And I just pulled these randomly when I did this. The ones I do next probably won't even match because I don't even remember what markers these were. But the thing is I imagine whatever goes here, and whatever goes in the middle of the collar goes on the placket here. So as you can see, I'm just getting an idea of where I think I would place these fabrics if I were to use them. And so as you see me speed up through this video, that is why I'm doing it. So let me go ahead and get started on that so you can get a full, well-rounded idea of how to take these notes and make them into products. So I'll see you in just a second. So as you saw in that quick little speed up, I went ahead and got all of these notes down onto new items here. And as you can see, these were the older ones I did. I don't think I matched the colors correctly, but it's fine. Again, it's just showing the different types of colors that you would use. But for the edited pieces here, you can see there's a difference between what they used to be and what they are now. So some things have been changed, some things even have been kept the same. This was very similar to the original, just extended. And this has lost a keyhole at the neck, and I kind of interpreted the skirt a little bit differently, so the folds were incorporated here. And I just kind of made things a little bit more symmetrical with this top. And so as you can see, again, more symmetry here, and adding with those folds instead of seam lines, just to make it a little bit easier and more ready to wear. And so again, even though there's a little bit of kookiness here with the way it's cut, it's very simple and streamlined. And so that's what I was going for, and you could do however you wanted to do with it. And so these were just the ones I did just to show you for the first collection. And so I'm just gonna lay them out really quick and put them kind of next to the mood board, which is what I like to do at this point, and just see how I feel about what it's conveying to me. And so we're gonna move this over here, and I'm gonna show you guys what I mean. So I usually just take all of my drawings like this and lay them next to this. And remember, we're not dealing with color or fabrics, because if we were thinking about colors and fabrics, we have to put those here too. And then you start to get an idea, but we're not dealing with colors and fabrics. We're just dealing with this basic silhouette, kind of getting those down. And so I'm seeing this, and I'm seeing this zigzags and these shapes. And so everything is starting to look like it comes from this right here. And it's crazy because you're actually looking at apparel items thinking like, how did that even happen? Or, you know, what happened here? How did that even become that? But, you know, if you didn't know that this was my process, you probably think that I didn't even, you know, have any sort of inspiration. I just started drawing stuff. But as you see moving on through this, how this became a thing, and how this went from these to this. So just to give you an idea of how that works, that is just an example of the first mood board. And off camera, by the time I film the next video, I will have all of these put into silhouettes as well, based on these notes.